This video is to help you with your first day of class, to get you oriented for our 3D design class and to set some expectations for your semester. So the three main sheets that you should have before you get to your first in-person day of class with us is your initial student communications, your syllabus, and your materials list. Having those is going to really help you to have a clearer understanding of what you should be expecting from this class. Of course, our first meeting was online, but our subsequent meetings will be on a AB group schedule. So Group A will be like the first half of the alphabet last name. Group B will be the second half of the alphabet last name. When Group A is meeting, Group B will be either following videos online or handout instructions, or you will be doing out-of-class stuff like research for your worksheets and looking at guidelines. So it's going to be a bit of a combination of both. If for some reason our semester does continue to change, we will remain flexible and I'll update you as that goes. But for right now, you should have communication about which group you are in and then a general understanding of the structure of this course. We will be meeting in person for 3 critique days. At that point, we will all be together in those 3 critique days, and those will be hosted outside where we can space out more, and we'll present certain projects at those times. We'll also have a 4th critique day, but that one will be totally virtual. Of course, D2L is a very important part of your class and your communication, so I expect you to be accessing D2L pretty often to keep up with the class. We, of course, are not meeting on our first day in person to kind of give some relief to the university in terms of being cramped in terms of how many people are attending at one time. And then your expectations for your on-campus participation. So basically what that means is, like, if you're going to participate in university in-person classes, you're going to have to follow the rules. So the guidelines that university sets out in terms of your mask policy, in terms of social distancing, all of those sort of health and safety regulations that have been set out, you're going to comply with those when you're in the classroom. If you need to step out for a while or something like that, that is understandable. You can take that to opportunity to help yourself, but when you're in the classroom, you're following those regulations. I'm not going to sit there and beg you to do it. You're either going to do it or you're not going to be in the classroom. So make sure that you understand the requirements of you before you enter the space. And then, of course, always contact me, because this is a fluid semester, because there are so many questions, and because our time together is going to be a lot more limited than normal. Contact me. Let me know if you need something special. If you contact me, especially with enough advance warning, I can accommodate you. If you don't contact me and you just sort of wing it, there's not going to be as much I can do to help you. So, help me help you. Right there. So the overall general structure of this course, this is a 3D design and composition course. So we're going to be focused on building your foundation of visual communication in the 3 dimensions of space. So not just flat, but working with space as our primary, addition. So what this is supposed to build a foundation for you from which then you can take this information and apply it to any facet of your artistic practice, whether it's design, whether you are doing art education, whether you are doing fine arts, any kind of visual communication. How are you using that effectively in 3 dimensions? So we'll be looking at that. You will, after this course, if you are fully engaging with everything I'm giving you, you should come out of here with a better understanding of your tools and materials, both by applying them and through experimenting. You'll have a deeper understanding of the successful application of critique of visual communication in the elements and principles of design. So I'm giving you chances to research artists. You're going to be looking at each other's work and giving each other feedback. You're going to be reviewing your own work as you do drafts and then make larger models of things. So you're going to have this system of feedback. that's very helpful for you as a visual artist. And you're also going to get practice giving others feedback as well. And then you'll be exploring new ideas in creative ways through 3 dimensions. And you're also, especially considering this semester, going to be working on your time management skills. How can you use your time in the most effective manner possible? So once you have successfully completed this course, you should demonstrate competency in applying the principles and elements of design to the 3-dimensional form, using your terminology correctly and effectively when critiquing or describing concepts. You'll have time management, problem-solving skills. You'll understand the impact of materials, tools, and culture and context on a work of art. So what goes into a work of art besides the final product. And you'll also work on converting drafts to final forms. Attendance is going to be a little bit iffy this semester. The best thing that I can give you is prioritize the time that you have with me, and then communicate with me early and often. If you're in Group A and you realize that week you can't do a Group A day, but you maybe could do a Group B day, don't just show up. Send me communication. Email me. The more that you email me, the better I am able to accommodate you. So keep an eye on that. We have your list of excused absences. Of course, with medical absences this semester, if you have any symptoms of COVID, if you feel you have been exposed to COVID, don't come to class. It's not just your classmates and myself that you expose, but all the vulnerable people that we are connected to. So don't come if you feel like you have COVID, if you feel sick or anything like that. Stay home, work from home. Email me. We'll find a way to make things work. I can be flexible if you communicate. There's also classroom etiquette. Basically, the basics of that is respect others, respect the space. If you make this space a good place for people to work, a place where people feel comfortable and safe in working, where you aren't leaving messes behind that you have been responsible for. If you need to go out because you need to take a phone call, because if you're hungry or you need to do something like that, you have the times to be able to do that. You have the freedom to be able to do that as long as it's not during my lecture. If you need to listen to music while you work, as long as it's not during instruction time, you can do that. So you do have a lot of freedom in this course as long as you are being responsible about it. Basically, what we are as a studio class means we're mostly focused on projects. They make up about 60% of your grade. Supplementing those projects are exams, worksheets, things for your sketchbook. So there are supplements for those, and a lot of those supplements, which normally would have been notebook things, I've made digital so that it's easier for you to split your time between the online and the in-person instruction. And know that, the time that you have with me is really important. You're not going to get as much class time with me as you normally would have. So you need to make the most of that. You need to use that time effectively by prioritizing when you are able to come into the classroom and the time that you actually spend in the classroom. There will be exams as well, 1 midterm and 1 final. Those will be all given digitally online. They're based on your worksheets for the most part and your research in the class. You've got your grade and evaluation breakdown as well as your grade scale and a more in-depth distribution of your grades. And then, of course, our university statements. I expect you to be familiar with the mask policy and to follow it to the letter when you are in the classroom. If you cannot abide by the policy, you do not come to the classroom. That's the simpleness of it, is you follow the policies that the university puts in place, and you can come to the classroom. So then there's also a nudity disclaimer as well. So we will be dealing with images of the nude figure. We will not be doing any in-person nudity in this class. We won't be having any life drawing or anything like that, but you will be dealing with the human figure in some form. So there is a chance for nudity. So there is a disclaimer for that. There's also your academic integrity, your compositions, your writing, all of that stuff is meant to be from your hand. If you are researching, you need to credit your sources, all of that kind of stuff. If you need accommodations with the university, again, communicate with me. Communicate with me early and often about what your restrictions or your supplements are, accommodations for any student disability services, because I can't retroactively apply them. It can only be set going forward. So if you know that you're going to need accommodations, communicate with me. And that's the basic structure of this course. It's going to be divided into 4 projects and 1 research presentation. So we'll be doing a project on wire and line. We'll be doing a project using cardboard and making shoes and scaling up things and making maquettes. We'll be doing a project based on plaster in the figurative form and high relief. And then we'll be doing a project that is based on found objects, on mandalas, on the artistic process, and how does material affect and impact your work. So we'll be doing those 4 projects, and then you'll also be researching a contemporary artist that you feel is also effectively working in 3 dimensions, and you'll examine and critique them as well. Okay, let's go to our materials. So for this class, you're going to need some things from like a hardware store, and you're going to need some things that are from more of a traditional art supplier. So the first thing that you're going to need is a pair of heavy-duty wire snips and pliers. These do not need to be like the little junky jewelry store ones. If you want to keep these around for like your thinner wire that you're going to be using, you can use these for that. But you have to at least have a heavy duty set. Now, heavy duty doesn't mean super expensive. I think these were only like $8. I think this is a Lowe's brand. But they're not that expensive. And if you get the right one, you can see that there's a pair of wire snips inside of these pliers. So if they have some wire snips inside, you don't have to buy them separate. You can just use the heavy duty pliers with the wire snips built in, and that saves you some money. So you've got that. You'll need rebar tie wire. This is a greased wire. You find it in the masonry and construction section, so near the wood in any of your hardware stores. You need the tie wire. Something I'm not requiring, but I do recommend, is because this wire is greased and it's also a steel wire that's going to have sharp edges and it does tend to cut up your hands. I do recommend you get a pair of thin leather gardening gloves, which are from the opposite side of your hardware store, usually in the gardening section. I do recommend a pair of those for when you're working. It's going to really save your hands, especially if you're a person who maybe plays a musical instrument or who uses their hands a lot for delicate stuff. They're going to get a little bit torn up if you don't have a bit of thin leather gloves. All right, let's see. Generic paintbrushes. These can also be gotten from your art supply store as well as the hardware store. I don't recommend getting like the absolute cheapest, like the 97-cent like gesso brushes or whatever. Those are like really terrible. They won't even last. They'll leave paint hairs, in your paint. So I recommend at least getting the ones that are like $4 or $5 a piece. If you get an even nicer one, it'll work even better for you. So it's not wasted money to get a nicer one. But at least, pay like $4 or $5 for them. You'll need a 1-inch and a 2-inch brush. This is just going to help make your jobs of covering spaces a little bit easier. So you need those 2 things. You'll need a plywood board right here, at least 3/4 of an inch in its width, right here in its thickness, 3/4 of an inch, and then have them cut it down to approximately 18 inches by 18 inches in the store. If it's not exactly 18 by 18, it's okay. I'm not going to measure it. They're not going to be super duper accurate. They cut my board definitely not to 18 by 18. It's more like 18 by 20. But it's okay. If it's in the general house, that's totally fine. These boards are generally sold, the project boards are sold big enough that you can actually split with somebody else and you can get them to cut them into 2. And then you and a partner can have 1 sheet of wood for half the price. So you can do that. Just make sure whenever you do buy your panel, you buy one that's not like warped, and bowed in any way. And also make sure that its surface is nice, that it's got like a smooth sanded surface. It's not full of like knot holes and things like that, like a low quality one. Get a nice one that has a nice surface to it. You'll also need some sandpaper. I don't have an example of it with me, but the sandpaper that you get from the hardware store, I do recommend that you get the one that is both wet and dry sandpaper as opposed to the just dry. You'll be able to have a lot more versatility with it if you get the wet dry sandpaper. And then we'll talk about hanging hardware when we get to projects 3 and 4, because you may be able to make your own if you decide to do it in a certain way. So hold off on that until you get to projects 3 or 4. So in general, what you'll need is you'll need a sketchbook of at least like 8 by 10. It can be bigger than that, that's fine. It can be a sketchbook that you also use for another class. The requirements are, though, it needs to be unlined white paper for you to sketch in, and if you are splitting it with another class, you need to like tab and label and keep it all in one section. Like, I don't want to have 2 pages at the front, 2 pages in the middle, and 2 pages in the back that I have to go hunt for. I want it to be one consistent section if you're splitting your notebook. So you need one notebook. You'll need a series of pens and pencils. It's up to you what you want. You can do Microns, Le Pens, Tombos, doesn't really matter. I'm not going to be particular about those because they're just for your sketches and your preliminary work. They're not going to be on your final work in any case. And you'll also need a pencil of some sort. If it's just a regular number 2 pencil, that's fine. If you want to use multiple ones, you can do that as well. So pens, pencils, things for sketching. Of course, having an eraser and a sharpener on hand so that you can actually use those is also important. So the materials for the drawing. You will need, in addition, some black craft wire. So this can be any kind of wire you get from, an arts or a craft store. As long as it's thinner than the rebar and it's black, it'll work. You'll need also some detail paintbrushes. So like a round brush, it's about a size 10 in that general family is fine. A round brush doesn't need to be too small because you're probably not going to be working on such a small scale that you'll need it to be like teeny tiny. So a good size round brush and a good size flat brush. Any of these flat brushes in here would honestly work. Flats or filberts. So one of those, if you're using it for another class, as long as that class is also acrylics, you can use those brushes too. You'll need scissors and an X-Acto knife. For your X-Acto knife, you will also need a pack of extra blades as well with it. I recommend the kind that comes like in the container where you can just shove the used blades into that container. Makes it a lot easier for you and a lot less dangerous for the trash because you have to tape up the blades as you dispose of them. If you don't have one of those containers, like if you're going to splurge somewhere, like I would splurge on your X-Acto knife because like it is so uncomfortable to use those metal ones that have like the texture on right here. I would just get massive dents when I would use these for projects back in the day. So I have decided that it is worth it to me to spend a few more dollars and get an X-Acto handle with a grip on it. It does make a difference. You need an 18-inch ruler with a cut guard. Cutting is going to be a huge part of especially Project 2. See how this is thick right here? What that does is that allows you, when you're putting something down, when you're cutting along a line, you can tuck your finger behind this guard and cut very smoothly and firmly and never worry about your hands. Like, I can't tell you how many projects I have ruined because it slid on too thin of a ruler. I can't tell you how many times I have cut my hands, just 2 pieces, because they weren't properly protected. So a cut guard ruler, 18 inches. It's going to be your friend in this class. And it will be your friend for the rest of your life. This is a ruler that you will have forever. And it will work beautifully for you until the day you die. It's going to be a good ruler. You'll need a cutting mat to match that ruler, also 18 inches. If you already have one for a different class and they required you to bring a larger one, you can use a larger one. You can also use a longer ruler than 18 inches. So if you happen to have a 3-foot ruler and a 3-foot cut mat, bring those. Don't buy a whole new one. You'll need a protractor. It can be any kind of thing. It's also nice to have a right angle guide as well, but at least a little protractor, because we'll be doing in project 2 a lot of measuring of angles. So a protractor is what you'll need. A right angle, if it happens to come in like a kit, is also helpful as well. You will need self-adhesive brown paper tape, often called paper packaging tape. There is another tape that's a little bit cheaper called gummed brown paper tape. The problem with that is like you are spending less money on that tape, but you have to take every section of that tape and wet it down with a sponge before you use it. So I recommend the paper packaging tape. It's a lot less work to get it to do what you need it to do. So I recommend this tape right here. You'll also need some masking tape. I'm not really particular about the thickness. I mean, I feel like very thin is not going to be very helpful for you. So like if it's 1/8 of an inch thick, it's probably a little thin for what you need, and it doesn't really need to be any thicker than 1 inch. You know, when you start getting much thicker than that, it just becomes unwieldy for you. So in the range of 1 inch is good. If you've got tape already that's a 1/2 inch, it'll work. You know, if you've got tape that's like 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches, I mean, it'll work. It's just less work for you to have to cut it down if it starts getting either way big or really small. You'll need a couple packs for project 3 of plaster cloth. This is the stuff that like you can make casts with, as in like when you've broken an arm. This is what that's made out of. So you'll need at least 1. You'll likely need 2, and you may even need 3. It's up to you how much you want to buy initially, but just know that like you can't come to class having run out last class period of plaster cloth and be like, well, I could be doing more, but I ran out. Like, that's not an excuse, you know? So you need to have enough to make what it is you're going to make. So I would suggest getting, you know, I mean, at the very least, you have to have 1. If you want to get more than that, it's your discretion, but you do have to maintain enough to be able to work in class, because you can't just come into class and not do any work. For right now, we're going to hold off on buying the plaster. It's possible that we may be getting some community plaster in, and if that's the case, you won't need this. If you do wind up needing to buy your own plaster, this is what I would recommend. Just a 3 to 5 pound box of it. You can split this with somebody too as well if we do end up needing to buy it, because you probably won't need all of it. You'll probably need close to half of it, but you won't need all of it. You'll need a couple sheets of poster board. If it's a large sheet, you'll only need 1. It can be white, it can be colored, it can be brown. It doesn't really matter. You're going to be making your maquette from this, but it does need to be like, you know, pretty thick, you know, pretty sturdy poster board. It doesn't need to be super thin and flimsy. If you had a pad of Bristol board left over from another class, you can use Bristol board too as well, if it saves you a little bit of money. You'll need a sheet of foam core as well, at least 1/4 inch thick. So foam core, again, if for some reason they're out of white, which they were for me, you can use a colored foam core as well. So if they didn't have white in the store, go ahead and get a gray. you're going to need two 18 by 18 squares of it. So if you get a large enough sheet, then you can just split that and have your two sheets from that. So foam core. I don't have an example with me, but you know what cardboard is. You need at least, if you're buying it, you need at least one of those 4 foot by 8 foot sheets. But you can, reuse, recycle, whatever boxes from other places. So if there is a store you know of that gets rid of boxes, which most stores do, have cardboard boxes that they dispose of, especially if you're talking about a place that has large appliances, or like art supplier who gets large canvases, you can get access to big sheets of cardboard from them for free, but they need to be of good quality. They can't be all beat up, and you do need to have them on time. So if you want to get them for free, totally fine. Just make sure that they're in a good enough shape for you to be able to work with them. The glue for this class is polyvinyl acetate. You can use hot glue to help tack things on, especially with Project 4, but I do have warnings about hot glue. Hot glue cannot be your only glue because it is a weak glue. You'll start finding pieces falling off when you're using hot glue. Hot glue is also like a very messy looking glue. So there's no way going to be on your final project visible hot glue strings, visible hot glue blobs. You can use it to help tack things together while you're using the PVA as your normal glue, and then you need to either clean up or remove or have made it so that the hot glue was never visible in the first place. So you can use hot glue as a help, but it should not be your final solution. You do need to have PVA. And then the last things that you'll need is, for project 2, you're going to need some materials for weighting down your project. So that's going to be something like sand, rice, glass marbles, something that you can put into a plastic baggie and then place into your project to weight it the way that you want to. You'll also need a large flexible plastic bowl, like a popcorn bowl, for mixing plaster in, and you'll also need like a disposable plate or any kind of surface that you like to use as a palette for mixing. I did forget to address paint. So for first project, for your project 1, you're going to need a container of white acrylic paint. Not latex, not oil, white acrylic. It can be craft level, but it does need to be acrylic. You'll need white. By project 2, you'll be supplementing that white with a black and then a color of your choice. If you already kind of know what color it is that you like to work in and you have a feeling that you want to commit, you can certainly commit to a color now, or you can wait until project 2 and you've committed to your color to make your color selection. But an inexpensive acrylic paint will work just fine for you. This is one of the lower cost paints that I know of. I'm sure that there are plenty of other brands as well. But you will need, for project 1, a white, and then by project 2, one color and a black. And then the last thing that you're going to be needing in terms of materials for this class is, for project 4, which is going to be, we're going to be starting working on that in November, you're going to need to have collected 100 disposable found objects. These can be bottle caps. Bottle caps are great. These can be, used plastic utensils, anything like that. But basically, objects that you didn't buy them for this class, so I don't want you to just go and buy 100 forks or something like that. I want you to collect and gather 100 disposable objects from your life, and then we're going to create mandalas from those objects. So we're going to create them using all the varieties that you have. We're going to create a low relief wall sculpture that is a mandala for your project. So that is something that, as you are going through the semester, you need to be mindful of, to be collecting 100 disposable objects. All right, so for your first day of class, what you're going to need to have with you for your first in-person day is if you at least have your pliers and your rebar tie wire, you'll be on a good jump for the class. If you have the remainder of your project one materials, that's even better. So that's your thinner wire right here. If you are getting gloves, you'll obviously need materials for your sketchbook too. So like you'll need at least your rebar tie wire, your pliers, and your sketchbook and something to write in, because we'll be doing some work with that in class as well. But if you have that, you'll be set for your first day. All right, you guys have a great one, and I will be seeing you soon.